Hey, everybody. As recruiters, we all know that hiring can be one of the most challenging parts of running a business. Whether you're a startup looking to build a dream team or a well established company aiming to streamline your recruitment process, the right tools can make all the difference. Teamtailor is a powerful all in one recruitment software your candidates and team will love. Teamtailor isn't just a piece of software, it's a way of working. With Teamtailor, you get everything you need in one place: powerful analytics, an AI assistant, customizable workflows, and more. Plus, Teamtailor is super easy to use and implement. You can onboard hiring managers with minimal training and get started right away, thanks to an easy implementation and intuitive, user friendly interface. 94% of teams report better collaboration, and 89% of companies say their hiring process is faster. If you're focused on the candidate experience, it's at the heart of the ATS. Just ask any of the 4 million candidates who connect with customers every month. Join the ranks of over 150,000 recruiters and more than 8,500 companies like Oatly, Porsche, and OneFlow who have transformed their recruitment with Teamtailor. Discover the new way to attract and hire top talent and see the results for yourself. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel TA podcast. You're tuned in today with Joshua Cruz, talent acquisition partner and industry personality. You may know him from his viral TikToks or his shining LinkedIn presence. What's up, Joshua?
Hey, what's going on? Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, 100%. This has been a long time coming. We were talking in the pre-recording just a little bit about how we connected online over the last couple of years, but what are you working on right now and where are you based?
Yeah, currently based in Boston, Massachusetts, or just outside of Boston. I was born and raised here. Just moved back like a little over 2 years ago. I was living in New York City for 7 years. If you live in New York City, have lived in New York City, you know it's kind of crazy. So after 2 years, I was like, yeah, this is wild. But I stayed for 7 years due to like many different things that I was doing. But I'm happy to be back in New England. Slower pace, much more beautiful, in my opinion. Currently what I'm working on, I'm really focusing on my passion projects. Honestly, I am in recruitment as you stated here, but I also build community outside of like my 9 to 5s when I have a 9 to 5, because as we know, I was just recently laid off, or we'll get into that. But I build community specifically for gay men, queer men. I try to also create space for queer men of color. I myself am a queer man of color, and I don't know that there's a lot of spaces for us to really come together to build community, talk about healing, talk about things that we are challenged with and struggle in our community with. And so it is my passion to bring us together to talk about those many different things. So that's really what I'm working on right now, and using my different platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram to and TikTok to talk about those things and tell my story.
Amazing. Thank you for that work. That takes
Mm-hmm.
a lot of energy and a lot of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Commonality plus connectivity does not equal community.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is something that social media in general, a lot of these platforms, that's been like the great lie and the great truth that we've come through this realization is that, just because you're plugged in and got somebody in your DMs and there's, 10 different ways to get in touch with us in a really intimate way through our phone doesn't necessarily mean we experience the benefits from a social perspective
Mm-hmm.
of community. So I know we're jumping right in on community, but what are your thoughts about community, how you define it?
Yeah, for me, the root of community and something that I've discovered for myself over the last few years that I've been doing this work is vulnerability. And I know we hear a lot about that. I think it's like a buzzword that's been thrown around for the last few years. But I think that if we really lean into that and we really understand what it means for us and what it can do for community, it really is something so powerful. And so, yeah, you're right. Like being online, having a big following, getting DMs, getting likes and comments, having a big network virtually does not necessarily mean that you've built community. I think what matters more is what are you offering to the community, and what is the community being able to offer to you that is going to enlighten you, that is going to build you up, give you more opportunity, could potentially create a better life for you and the people around you and the people that are in community with you. And what I found is that vulnerability has done that for me. And this is how I built my community on every single platform that I've been on, because I believe that telling my story and telling the things that I've been through and what I struggle with and I'm challenged with, but also what I have triumphed over, allows other people to know that they're not alone. They feel more connected because it's not just like this facade of like, oh, this person has this great life, they have a job, or they have these cars, or they have this big house, or all this money. No, what they're seeing is, wow, this person struggles with depression, has anxiety. This person just got laid off. This person is struggling to find their sense of self-worth or who they really are. And that, I think, brings people much more closer together because they realize they're not in this alone. They actually have somebody that they can look to and relate to and say, wow, their story is similar to mine. I feel much more connected. And that kind of digital wall that is put up there that creates that facade is kind of taken down inch by inch, because you get to peel back the layers of like all of that code and say, oh, yeah, I see the human in you. I see what you actually offer beyond looking through the screen.
Yeah, shout out to Brene Brown for making vulnerability part of our vernacular.
Mm-hmm.
I know she's done a lot of work in this space. You mentioned the digital veneer, but when it comes to presenting and coding, particularly around masculinity, we see that
Mm.
in the real world as well. And our digital persona and our digital footprint is a reflection of how we interact in the real world as well. It brings me back to the phrase think globally, act locally. And the world is not as like binary, us versus them, red versus blue, black versus
Mm-hmm.
white, as we make it out to be, I think, online, and the way the algorithm fuels our rage through
Yes.
engagements. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges of our time, particularly as young folks develop social skills and develop critical thinking skills, but also as we try on those veneers, because like you mentioned, we have to break down how we present in order to get to our true self, which is that
Yeah.
element of self-awareness, how we conduct ourselves, living an authentic life and being the people that we want to be so that we can then model it for others. What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, there's a lot to say on that. And I agree, there's so much nuance when it comes to the conversations that we're having online. I have found myself to be like inundated with so much information, and a lot of it is on one end and then on the other. And I'm like, oh, I agree with that. And then I find myself like getting wrapped up and feeling like I'm becoming something that I may not want to become because I'm fueled by whatever it is that I'm reading, whether it be rage, anger, sadness, it could be joy. But is that my joy, right? Or am I just letting that become my joy because like I relate to some of what a person says, right? And so I think it's super important to really understand the nuances in conversations that are happening outside of the digital sphere, because when we get online and we read comments, we see a post and we're like, oh wow, this seems interesting, or oh, that, like, I agree with that. And then you go in the comments and then it's like you see all of these different comments from different people. It could be all in agreement to what you think and what the post is saying. It can be in disagreements. I think that's a word, I don't know, but or in disagreement. But I think for me, what has happened in the past is that I've gotten caught up. And so what I try to do now, and I still find myself sometimes, getting into a space of getting caught up in those comments, but then I have to take a step back and say, wait a minute, like I'm doom scrolling right now and I'm reading all of these comments and it's making me feel some type of way. Do I actually agree with this? Is this something that I've critically thought about? And if I say to myself, no, actually, I think that I'm just reading other people's opinions and like getting angry because they're angry, I have to take a step back and say to myself, this is not the real world. I need to figure out what is the real world. And that means having more intimate conversations. Even if that is online, it's getting into a space that is safe enough to have these intimate conversations so that you can get that nuance. Because if you don't have that nuance, then you're going to maybe build a personality around somebody else's rage, anger, or sadness. and that's not going to be beneficial for your life. And going back to the topic around community, you're not going to be able to create deep and meaningful community that you actually feel a part of, because it's actually built around something that you actually have no understanding of yourself.
That level of authenticity is critical. I'm sure you've experienced this phenomenon, we'll call it, where you meet somebody in real life or on a Zoom call and they are nothing like their meme game. And it's such a letdown, because I think people have connected with individuals that they identify with online, and that's one of the
Mhm.
good things about these platforms is people, particularly from underrepresented groups or marginalized experience, or if they're looking for mentorship, can connect through that connectivity pretty quickly. When you think about recruiting, I think that level of authenticity shines through when you're talking with candidates and you're able to represent who candidates think you are online
Mhm.
if you've reached an algorithmic following. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what it's like to interface with candidates who are probably excited or know about you before they meet you for a recruiter screen call. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting experience. I have had people get on calls with me and say, "Oh, the famous Joshua, the dancing recruiter, or the LinkedIn social media influencer." And it's interesting and it's funny, and it makes me feel good sometimes, because I'm like, "Oh yeah, it makes me feel good because when I'm online, I am being as authentic as I possibly can be." And so when people get on a call with me and they affirm that, I'm like, yeah, I thank you, because I am trying my best to show up as my best self. And so when I get on these calls, it's a beautiful experience, and I also think it creates a sense of comfort for the people getting on the call, because they already know, or hope that they know, or in some capacity they know that they can show up as themselves in one way or the other, right? They might still have a little bit of reluctancy. I think I'm making up another word, but they might be a little bit more reluctant to do it, because again, they are still getting on the phone with a recruiter. They want the job, right? Potentially, they don't actually know if the person on the posts that they read every day, or the TikTok videos that they watch, if that's the person that's going to show up on the call, right? And so they might be a little bit reluctant to being as authentic as they can. But I think that me being myself in this space, in this industry, or in any industry, in corporate, on LinkedIn, which is a space that a lot of people still believe is only a professional networking platform. Um, for them to have the experience of seeing a recruiter who can be themselves and being on a call with them, it provides them the space to also do the same. And I think that promotes a sense of inclusivity, a sense of humanness, that authenticity piece that we're talking about. And I think it makes it easier for them to feel like they can be a part of the company that they're interviewing for, because they see me, a person that's working at that company that they might connect with because of my authenticity, and say, "Oh, he's working there, and if he's working there and he's happy, then I might have that same experience." And that's not true for everyone, right? But I think for the most part it can be, at least to some capacity, and I think that that's why it's so powerful when we can show up as ourselves on a platform, especially like LinkedIn, because we're creating space for people to show up as themselves in the workspace.
Yeah, I love that, Joshua. You have a post that went pretty viral on LinkedIn talking about authenticity, and I think your quote in the content was being on this platform sometimes gives you this mindset that you need to act, look, and be a certain way.
Mhm.
And the photo that accompanies that is you with that smile, and you're talking about your smile. But there's this idea of what does professional mean? What
Mhm.
does professional look like? And you specifically call out like being tattooed. I think that's something that is really unique that I share as well. Being, pretty heavily tattooed, like for a lot of my career, I covered
Mhm.
that stuff up and
Mhm.
didn't have that confidence, particularly in like a corporate HR department, to come in like with the chest tattoo showing, with, my sleeve showing. And hey, I want to thank you for that post, but talk to me a little bit about like how you think that relates to candidates and how candidates can find relatability and comfortability in the interview process if they see a recruiter show up like that.
Yeah. I think it sends a powerful statement to candidates to one, be more authentic, right? And I know that that's not easy for everyone. Everyone's experience is not the same. So some people's authenticity might look different than others. Some people might be able to be more authentic than others. There is like those that sense of privilege that some people may have, right? And I acknowledge that, but I tell people, or what I try to let people know, is that when you can be yourself, or when you start to be yourself, you start to push away everything that's not in line with who you are. And that is in turn going to push away, you're going to subconsciously or more consciously push away opportunities or companies that you don't actually want to work for, that you thought you wanted to work for because you were coming from a place of inauthenticity. You are now coming from a place of authenticity, and therefore you're going to search out the companies, the corporations, the industries that you can actually show yourself, show who you are. And when I started to realize that I didn't want to hide myself, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to look for companies that I can be myself at. And how do I do that? I'm going to look at who works there. I'm going to look at what their conversations around DEI, inclusivity, diversity look like. I'm going to show up as myself as best as possible in these conversations when I am the candidate and I am, uh, interviewing for the role. Right? It doesn't mean that I'm going to show up in a tank top so you can see all of my tattoos and things like that. Right? But it might mean that I might show up in a button up, but it might not be buttoned all the way up. So you can see that I have a neck tattoo and a chest tattoo, because I want to see what your possible reaction is going to be to that. Because if I feel that I can't show up as myself in the workplace, how am I going to be happy in this place and do the job? Right? I'm not going to be able to do the job the best I can if I'm not happy. Right? And again, I know that that's not the reality for a lot of people. Some people have to make that sacrifice, and that's understandable. But to the people that have the space to be able to show up as themselves, I encourage you to make those little changes to make yourself feel better, so that you can see if the company that you're interviewing for, if the people that you're interviewing with are receiving that and are accepting of that, so that you can show up in a space and feel good about the space that you're showing up into, because then you're going to be able to do your best work. And I think companies can really benefit from allowing people to be more of themselves, as we know, right? Because when a person can show up as their best self and they can bring that to the table, they're going to be excited to come to work. They're going to be excited to work with their coworkers and their managers. They're going to share parts of themselves that can change the entire company, can change people in the company in a good way. So I think that coming as yourself can change so much, not only for yourself, but for the people that you're coming into contact with. And I think my post that talks about that is uh, uh, such a great way to see the fruits of showing up as yourself, right? I've experienced that for myself.
Yeah, it makes me think that we are in the largest generationally diverse workforce of our
Hmm.
time, regardless of what sector you work in. And we all have different social norms and cues and cultural operating ideas. But when it comes to things like dress code and uniform standards, like I always ask myself, like, well, who wrote these rules? Who was in
Hmm.
power that said this is how we define it?
Yeah.
Um, because that authenticity is going to shine through. And if our customers, regardless of industry, dictate those policies and dictate professionalism, that's what matters at the end of the day. Are we
Hmm.
able to connect with a broad demographic set of customers that purchase our product, and how
Hmm.
we relate to those people?
Yeah.
It also makes me think of that I'm old. It makes me think of Office Space, the movie where the server has 37 pieces of flair at the restaurant they eat lunch at. And it's this idea of like what buttons they have on their apron being that authenticity. Um, I don't know why that popped into my head, but it makes me think about particularly like consumer brands, and that's something that you and
Hmm.
I share. Like we've both worked in retail recruitment, which
Yeah.
is really fascinating for a few reasons. But maybe just tell your quick like recruiting story. Like how'd you get into recruiting? You worked
Yeah.
for a couple of big brands in the space doing like global recruitment. Um, who are you as a recruiter?
Yeah. Love this question. My recruitment story, I think, is so interesting and maybe a little bit unconventional, but I started recruiting in a company called Joe and the Juice. People might know it now. They've been, and if you don't, I also understand they're still probably expanding, but they were very big or are very big in Norway, like in Scandinavia and things like in those countries. They came over to the US in late 2015 or early 2016, something like that. And I joined them as a barista. I was a juicer. I was making coffee sandwiches and stuff like that in their stores. And I just one day, one of the guys came in and they were like, "Oh yeah, we went to Australia and they're opening a new store and we recruited for them." And I was like, "Recruited? What do you mean? What does that mean? You went to Australia? The company flew you to Australia? Like I want to do that." So they were like, "Oh, like we have some spots opening up on the team." And I had met the manager of the recruitment team and I was like, "Hey, like I want to try this out." And so he was like, "Okay, like basically like come audition, basically come out with us, let's see how you do." And I just took off from there and I was like, "Oh, okay, like tell the story of like the company that has made me so happy in the last, year or two because I've been able to show up as myself." Mind you, this was a company that was very very wanted you to be authentically like you can show up. It was funny because at the time that I started in the company, they had this like rock star attitude. So it was like everyone had tattoos. You could wear what you wanted. The dress code was kind of like black t-shirt, black jeans, because we were working with juice, coffee, and sandwiches. So it was like, you didn't want to get messed up. So if you're wearing white, it'd look crazy. But for the most part, you could show up as yourself. So that was kind of like an eye-opening experience for me because I always thought like working in big companies, you had to like look a certain way, especially when you're working in HR. So that was the beginning of my recruitment journey. Joined there, helped them to recruit for 35 plus stores all over the US. They flew me to Australia, to London, and I just took off in my recruitment career from there. Joined another big food and beverage brand called Soho House Private Members Club. Was a little bit nervous joining that because, again, didn't have a college degree, had a big neck tattoo. This was a little bit more formal, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. Like, ain't nobody gonna stop me. And I applied and I got the job. And that was kind of like the deciding factor of like I'm always gonna show up as myself because I know what I bring to the table. And if you don't see it just because of my neck tattoo or my beard or just being me, then you're missing out on the opportunity to have someone really great in your company. And so went to that company, did some recruitment and HR work there. And funny enough, my title was actually like human resources assistant manager and doing recruitment. So it was like people were like, "You work in HR?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I work in HR with this like big tattoo, right?" And I just no one could stop me, and I wouldn't let them. And then I got into tech from there, like started doing B2B sales recruitment, some marketing recruitment, got into like a digital marketing company. Then, as of late, I was with Two Chairs, really great company. They're past the startup phase into more small business now, making a name for themselves in the mental health tech space. Really amazing opportunity. But again, it's so interesting showing up in that space because I think people's perception again is like, oh, therapist, you're supposed to be professional and you have this tattoo and all of these things, or you have like this type of look. Like, how are people gonna want to talk to you? Because when you think of therapists, you're thinking like PhDs and these are doctors and these. But I'm like, well, these are also people that understand human behavior. They understand, they can look maybe past what a person looks like or how they act. That's literally their job. So it's like, for me, I never felt the fear to show up in this space. And so as of recently, I was in that space, and it was such a great experience. And yeah, I consider myself to be an all around kind of recruiter. I have experience in food and beverage, in sales and marketing, in digital marketing, and now in the telehealth
Nice.
therapy space. And so it's really interesting background.
Having a wide breadth of experience in recruiting in different industries, I think makes recruiters super powered, because at the end of the day,
Yes.
we're influencing human behavior through our
Yep.
words, through the copy
Hmm.
we send in an email, through our ability to connect with people. And to me, there's a lot of crossover with our experience. I got my
Hmm.
HR and recruiting start for a organic grocery store, and I had worked
Mm.
in the food and beverage industry. I was like a server, restaurant manager, loved hospitality.
Yeah.
Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table, really was like the guiding point in my
Hmm.
early career. But when I got into recruiting, I was able to travel the country. I moved across the
Love
country to
that.
Colorado when I got a job offer for my first HR job, first salary job, where I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." And I showed up, and there were people, in the black t-shirts and black jeans, tattooed, piercings,
Hmm.
dreadlocks, colored hair. Like, it was awesome, because I finally felt that, like, I was affirmed that, like, yes,
Hmm.
you could have this like great paying career and opportunity to advance skills, connect with people, but also I got to see the country, and I traveled around with my running shoes and got to run across the country at awesome
Love it.
trails. Um, and it laid the groundwork for connecting with people.
Hmm.
One of the observations when we think about recruitment right now is how much AI is kind of promising, like, to do more with less, or a shortcut to tap into talent pools.
Hmm.
I have a theory that I think folks like yourself may have a jump start in recruiting in the coming years, when we see more talent that does not have a digital profile. At the end of the
Hmm.
day, all of these LLMs for sourcing are, identifying talent that has a
Yeah.
digital profile that sits in a
Hmm.
database somewhere. As a millennial, I think it was Dave Eggers, the writer, who said, like, Americans, like, we gave away our privacy for free email.
Mm.
And then when you think about LinkedIn having like 200 plus million members in North America, um, that's kind of a product of scarcity mindset coming out of the Great Recession, and millennials needing a job, and like us having that social media promise that, like, connected with folks online could lead to a job, which it very well can. And it's a
Hmm.
tool in the toolkit for networking. But I'm going to be curious, like, how Gen Z responds, and are software engineers or marketing managers or great customer service, customer success types for software companies going to have all of that data that can
Hmm.
be extracted through a digital sourcing toolkit. And I think you might have an upper hand when it comes to knowing how to find folks that don't have a digital profile.
Yeah. Yeah, I think where we are right now is such an interesting time. And I think it's super important to start to understand the way the industry is shifting, how to look at recruiting from a different standpoint, how to look at yourself as a candidate from a different standpoint as well, and learning about your different skill sets, and aligning that with your passions too, right? Because, for example, myself, I'm a recruiter, but I love dancing, I love storytelling, I love content creation, and this is something that I've incorporated in my work. You know what I'm saying? I think, kind of going back to what you said earlier around, like, recruiters have such a wide variety of different skill sets because of the variety of ways that we have to recruit. And something that I've learned along the way, and you've probably learned this too, and any good recruiter listening, right, is going to understand that recruitment is not only about like looking for people. It's like you're coaching people, you're analyzing data, you're investigating people's profiles, really looking at their resumes and understanding what their backgrounds are. You're a motivator. You could be like a therapist too, not licensed obviously, right? But there's so much work that goes into our job. It's not just we're online looking at an applicant tracking system and saying no, yes, no, yes. Like, we're here to be a support system for our candidates too. And so I think it's important going into whatever you're doing, whether you are a recruiter or a candidate, how can you use the digital space to either enhance your sourcing, your recruitment, or how can you use the digital space to enhance your candidate experience or allowing the people to see you, right? So for me, it was like, well, I had another viral, actually two viral videos that was me dancing. It was like the resume, but make it a TikTok. That
Yeah.
was like one of the first times I got laid off. That one went super viral. And then the follow up to that one was I got a job and I did another dancing video.
Okay.
And, in that first one, it was like, of course you can't, I'm telling you my resume in this video, but you're probably distracted by my dancing. But like it had like over 500,000 impressions, maybe even more. Like I just don't even remember. It went pretty viral and it put me in front of so many people, and I actually got a job because of that video.
That's awesome.
You know what I'm saying? Of course I had to submit a resume and do interviews, but it's like I used my passion outside of recruitment, but aligned it with what I was doing already to be seen. Because as we know, even before and now and continuing as we move forward, the job market is going to continue to be saturated. I think there's many people that are that there's always going to be people looking for a job. So right now there might be more people looking for a job because of all the layoffs that we're seeing. But even in a time where there's not as many people looking for a job, it's always great to think of a way for you to stand out so that you can make an impression on wherever you're looking for a job as a candidate, but also from the recruitment standpoint, or even for someone working for a company. How can you make a difference using your other skills and passions as an employee for that company, so that you can have a better experience and you can have more fun? That's the way that I like to look at it.
I agree with that so much. Life is like far too short not to work on cool problems with interesting people, and
Mm-hmm.
recruiting should be fun. Like, yeah, we
Yes.
deal with a lot. If you're a recruiter that touches on some HR areas, like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, there's like some of that core foundation and core training and experience that
Mm-hmm.
comes through like running employee relations,
Mm-hmm.
investigations, sometimes terminations, performance management conversations, like very real strategic
Mm-hmm.
operational components of operating in a business. But at the end of the day, like if you're one of the HR folks that leans into recruiting, that likes to get out and source, that likes to get on calls, isn't afraid of a little bit of pressure to fill a rec early or on time,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a rewarding career for folks. And that level of authenticity really shines through. I think I remember, the first times I sent maybe even just like a selfie shot video to a candidate or sent a GIF to a candidate. And it's
Mm-hmm.
these little ways to bring some sort of humanity into the process. I always think that any candidate I engage, like they've got a competing offer for 20% more from our direct competitor in hand
Mm-hmm.
when I outreach them. And
Mm-hmm.
that level of intensity helps me show up and drive that communication as we move down to an offer in the funnel. You
Mm-hmm.
never know what it is going to be that gets a candidate to say yes. And often it's not at that offer call.
Right.
They could have an intuition or a gut feeling that's really aligned at one of those other communication stages. And I think it's about
Mm-hmm.
healthy risk taking. And we do that through listening. And I think recruiters are great talkers, but we're also fantastic listeners.
100%. You know how many offers that I've gotten accepted that they've had a competing offer that was more higher, but they were like, I just really love the support that you gave me, the support of the interviewing managers, the culture of the company, the way I felt. That's more important to me than the extra 5K that I might get at this other company. So I think that's why it's important, especially as recruiters, the moment a person applies to the job, the moment that you are even getting that first email from them, your relationship starts there. Your partnership with them starts there. I like to look at my recruiting as a partnership because I don't see it as a one-way thing. I'm trying to understand if this is beneficial for both of us. How can you help me and how can I help you? Is this going to align? I want it to align for you. I want you to be happy. I'm personally, for me as a recruiter, I'm not just here to fill a rec. Like, if a company wants to hire me to just fill a rec, I'm not the one for you. I want the person to want to work here because, again, that's going to be beneficial for the company at the end of the day anyways. But I think going into conversations with candidates, it's important to look at it like it's a partnership and treat them as with respect and with a high touch experience from the beginning. Email them, talk to them, support them. If they don't understand something, explain it to them. Give them a resource. If they need extra help before the first or second interview, get on a phone call with them. Don't just think, I'm emailing you, you're on to the next round. Cool, we'll talk when you get the offer. No, every step of the way matters. Those emails matters, those text messages matters, those phone calls that they might need matter because they might have questions that come up that maybe they didn't think of in those first conversations, or they didn't know that they could actually ask those questions until you made them feel comfortable enough to ask those questions. So yeah, creating that partnership, super, super, super important when it comes to recruitment, and that high touch experience is going to make such a difference because the competing company might be offering them 20% more. But if that competing company didn't give them the support that you have given them throughout the entire interview process, they might feel better coming into the company at a more less what am I trying to say, with a less compensation than they would in that other company, but what they're getting is a more better experience.
Yeah, I think it's Lou Adler who wrote Hire with Your Head, Spend More Time with the Right Candidates.
Mm.
And that high touch is really how I think about it. I love the way you phrase that as a partnership. I think partnerships means a lot of things in different industries, but I love like recruitment partnership. And if you're ratcheting down your yield ratios at certain stages in the funnel, it can truly be a partnership. Because that's where we then tie accountability into post-hire outcomes. And if you're working in a small org, you're working with that hiring manager. Recruiters have more data than, say, our HR business partner counterparts because we can interact with them through their digital profile at times before we even have a first conversation. So I think that's one of the data points that I've been chewing on recently, where I think we're going to see more chief people officers, chief HR officers coming from a recruiting track because that data is really important and the relationship is really important as it kickstarts the employee life cycle.
100%.
So I'm excited for the future of recruiting, the future of talent. I want to talk a little bit about just your observations in recruiting, like right now. What are you seeing in terms of the market? What kind of recs have you been working? What's going down?
Yeah. Oh goodness. As recruiters right now don't have the best rep. I think it's, as far as I've seen, it's looked like that over the last 2 years. And at least that's what it looks like on LinkedIn, right? And there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much misinformation around applicant tracking systems, especially applicant tracking systems. So I think that what I'm seeing right now is a lot of people, and to no fault of theirs, people being really angry with the recruitment industry, with recruiters. I get it, totally understand it. You know what I'm saying? And this is why I think it's important that when companies hire recruiters, they understand what the recruiter is bringing to the table in terms of being able to build relationships, because they're the face of the company. They're the first people that candidates are going to talk to. That they might be the first person that candidate sees on LinkedIn. So hiring the right person for that can actually build relationships and build good a good brand for them is super important. But to no fault of candidates, I completely understand why they may feel the way recruiters do. And so my hope, is that we can continue to shift the conversation, having conversations like this and getting the perspective of recruiters who are actually doing a good job, because there are really bad recruiters out there. I've seen them, right? I've been in conversation with them, but we many of us are doing the right thing. And I think as long as we continue to have these conversations and throw out the right information, there's people on LinkedIn that are doing that. Jelani Weaver is a great example
Oh
of
yeah.
really bringing out really great information. There's also uh, I can't remember her name right now. There's a few others out there. I'll try to remember them as I go on. But I think getting the right information is super important and putting out the right information. I also want people to understand that recruiters are also humans too, that we are also dealing with so much in our jobs. Again, we're not only just looking at an applicant tracking system or a resume, we are sometimes being the motivator for our candidates. Sometimes we are the one that the candidate is calling at 7 p.m. at night because who knows why, right? We might have to navigate a change within the company with our candidate as the candidate is going through the interview process. And that is such a difficult thing to do because it might not be beneficial for the candidate, or it might not look beneficial for the candidate in that moment. And we have to be the ones to deliver that news and try and explain to the candidate, hey, this is going to be okay. Like we're in this together, right? We get a lot of slack from sometimes the companies that we work for, because a lot of the times when you think about layoffs, the first department that is looked at is usually talent acquisition department,
Yep.
the recruitment department, because they say, okay, well, if we're having layoffs, that means we're pausing hiring, and if we're pausing hiring, why do we need recruiters?
Yep.
And so we have a lot of we have to do a lot of work to prove our value in companies, which for me, it's like, why? Because if you don't have us, then you don't have a company. But that's just the way that it is, right? And so I hope that people can continue to see recruiters as not just recruiters, but as people that are handling so much on their plate as well. And we are not the gatekeepers of jobs. We do not make the final
Yep.
decisions. And it's important for people to know that. In terms of what I'm working on right now, just got out of 2 chairs, was working on clinical therapist roles, and I'm continuing in that market. I think for me, I'm super aligned with mental health. I'm a mental health advocate. I love talking about mental health. Healing is one of the things that I talk a lot about. Vulnerability is my superpower. So being in line with the mental health tech space is super, super interesting and awesome. And I love collaborating with therapists to really understand their paths and their backgrounds and what they're looking for. So that's what I'm working on right now, hoping to go into another company that's doing that work as well, to continue on that path.
Awesome.
Loved talking to therapists. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think when I think about the um, talent pool and like the social worker, clinical social worker, clinical therapist shortage that we're having, there's a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
marketplace startups where it's like, oh yeah, we need therapy. So let's hire a bunch of folks as freelancers to join our platform. Like that's actually a very saturated like venture capital startup market,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to elevate and hopefully empower those pathways for certified professionals that will then allow those platforms to exist and thrive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like if you're able to connect with a therapist or a social worker online versus finding somebody that's in your community that takes your insurance, like it is alleviating so much of the logistics and red tape that
Yeah,
prevents people from getting the care they need. I've done it. I've
100%.
done capacity planning for like sourcing for mental health professionals, and it's wild because they are often those folks that are highly educated, require a certification, certain degree requirements, um, don't often have a digital profile. It's an
Yeah.
interesting use case for recruitment that I've enjoyed. It's a cool
Mm-hmm.
challenge.
Yeah.
um, One of the pieces that you shared about being a mental health advocate is the power of positive self-talk.
Mm.
Can you touch on that a little bit? You spoke earlier about knowing your value. I think it comes from
Yeah.
a place of the stories we tell ourselves.
Oof, yes, 100%. This is something I'm always working on with myself. Also, something that has completely changed my life, shifted my perspective. the stories that we tell ourselves are so important to become aware of. I think the first step in healing is also the most difficult one, and that's becoming aware of your negative self-talk, negative thought patterns, negative behavioral patterns. When we become aware of those, oftentimes healing becomes much more difficult because we start to become aware of the things that we're doing in our lives that are not benefiting us. And we want to change them, but they're really hard to change, especially if they're conditioned within us. And so having that awareness and wanting to change, but then have the other side of like, oh my God, this is so hard. I'm so used to doing it this way is super hard. But once you get over that, once you become aware and become and do the work day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, however it comes for you, you'll get to a place where you feel much more stronger to take on the challenge of fighting back against that negative self-talk, fighting back against the ego that has driven you to make choices that have not been beneficial for you. So, I always tell people become aware, start to question the thoughts that are coming up in your head. If you start to say, oh, I'm not good enough, ask yourself, why are you saying that? Where is that actually coming from? Is that really true? And then when you ask, is that really true? You can even say, okay, well, if I'm not good enough, then why do I have this? Why do I have this job? Why do I have this relationship? Why do I have this opportunity? If I wasn't good enough, I wouldn't have these things. Therefore, what you're saying is actually not true. It's just the conditioning that has been put onto you, maybe from your past. Maybe it's unhealed childhood trauma. But being able to reframe your thoughts. Breathing techniques are super important. There's box breathing. I think it's when you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it at the top for like 4, and then breathe out slower 1, 2, 3, 4. Super powerful. Meditation is also super powerful. And I know a lot of these things again might be buzzwords, or you might hear them or like, do they actually work? Yes, they do. They might not work for everyone, right? But I think for a lot of people, they do. Some people might have different ways of meditating. Go out for a walk. I tend to go out for a walk, breathe in fresh air, take in the sun. You don't know how powerful it is to open up your screens or your curtains and let that sun hit you in the face in the morning. That's just so powerful. So all of these things are super important to like get you to the next phase in your healing journey.
Dang, dude, where do we send our insurance information?
I am a life coach too, okay? So if y'all want to work with me, I'm not a licensed therapist or anything. I'm not going to dig into your childhood trauma, but if you want to talk about, how to reframe things and go after a goal, please book me.
Yes, we will put that link in the show notes. Joshua, that's amazing. Before we wrap up, actually, today we talked about having fun at work. I want to do a fun segment. It's called Inked In. We talked
Mhm.
about having tattoos and being professional and what that means. I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you have a tattoo story that is particularly meaningful to you?
Um, well, interestingly enough, all of my tattoos have meaning. I every time I get a tattoo, I'm like, does this mean something to me? Do I just want to get a tattoo just because whatever? But I've always thought about what I wanted to get on my body because I wanted to tell a story. Uh, I would say the one on my chest is super meaningful to me. It's one of the first ones I got. It says strength. And when I got it, people would always ask me, like, why would you get a tattoo that says strength? Like, because I also lift weights, and people just kind of like would think that it had to do with like my physical body. But actually, it wasn't strength physically, it was strength in the mind. So I would always look in the mirror, and when I would see strength, I would be able to say, I'm strong in the mind. And if I'm strong in my mind, I can overcome anything. And when I got that tattoo, I was in such a weird phase in my life. I think I was like, I don't know, 20, 21, something like that. And I was seeing a shift in my life. And this was just before I had decided that I was going to travel the world, go on this like backpacking journey. And so that was just a reminder to me that I could do anything. So getting that tattoo definitely shaped a good portion of my 20s.
That's amazing. I love that you talk about strength of the mind, and earlier you mentioned the tool of meditation. You're wearing a
Mhm.
Jordan hoodie and Phil Jackson was successful leading the Bulls, he taught Michael Jordan and the team about visualization and mindfulness. And like Phil was kind of like this old hippie back in the
Yeah.
90s. And I think that's a cool part of um, Eastern philosophy that is
Mhm.
infiltrated mainstream culture in a Western world. But this has been a really fruitful conversation, Joshua. I'm really glad that we had some time to spend together.
Me
I
too.
appreciate all the work you're doing. Community ends with unity, but I'd argue it begins with it.
Mm, mm.
Thank you for bringing some unity to my day.
Thank you.